need to get in touch with the Afghan Education Board for Pakistan. Next slide, please.
Again, if I can add something here.
Yes.
So in terms of scholarship, the ISP or International Scholarship Program, there is one available. So we have not in detail mentioned this one here in Canada for international students, but it's very tricky. And the eligibility criteria for that scholarship, again, is very tricky. And I say this because you cannot apply for that scholarship when you are in Pakistan. You're only eligible to apply for this one, the one that you see on your screen right now, Afghan Foundation one from Pakistan. If you are, let's say, applying to a Canadian university. The one that I'm talking about is actually also called ISP, but you are only eligible to apply for that once you are in Canada, once you have gotten an admission in master's or PhD, but you have not started your studies. And the rest of the criteria is exactly similar what you see on your screen, that you should be from a developing country, that it should be a highly reputable university, and the program of study should be relevant to AKDN. But again, I say that the criteria is very tricky because you have to be in Canada, but you have not started studying in Canada. So that's why it gets very tricky.
Yeah.
And there are multiple scenarios where it can happen, but again, it's unlikely as well sometimes to even see those scenarios too.
Yeah. I can give you one example if we are going to talk about this a little bit more. You come here for your undergrad degree. You are in Pakistan, you're coming in, you finished your undergraduate degree, or you are in your final year of undergraduate degree. So you are clearly an international student, and you decide to apply for a master's degree. So while you are here on your study permit for undergrad, when you're applying for your master's program, you could apply for that ISP scholarship that Shanil was just talking about, that is available from Afghan Education Board Canada for international students. But then you would already be here in Canada, and that's why you would have met that requirement as an international student. So being from Pakistan, being in Pakistan, you are not eligible for that scholarship, and that is why we are not showing that to you here. But if you have any questions, we can talk about that a little bit later. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so far we've talked about scholarships, bursaries, loans. So this is funding that you get from outside. What can you do though? How can you work to get money? One of the very good options in Canada, and that's why I love Canada, a Canadian education system, is they have this program called co-op, and that allows you to get work experience and earn money while you are studying. When I say while you are studying, I don't mean exactly when you're studying. I mean, maybe you apply for a co-op program, you're coming here for an undergraduate degree or a master's degree, and your university offers a co-op option. That means you're probably going to study for 2 terms, then work for another term, then study for 2 more terms, then work for a term. And during those work terms where you're not studying, but you're officially working full-time, that's where you can earn up to 80. So what the statistics here show, between $8,400 and $19,800 per work term. So that's a very optimistic estimate. But there are only certain schools that offer co-op options. So you need to be very careful when you're applying which university offers co-op option. I have a list of universities or colleges that do offer that option showing up there. Another way you can fund your own education is by working on or off campus while you are studying. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in the policy section. But as far as working on campus is concerned, the IRCC does not limit the number of hours you can work on campus, but there are strict limitations in terms of working off campus. Regardless of whatever I'm saying right now, what your work permit says will trump everything. Sometimes your work permit will specify exactly how many hours you can work on campus. And if that says 10 hours, then that work permit trumps anything I've just said. Okay? So you have to be very careful looking into that work permit that you get. Summer opportunities. During the summer, especially when you are an undergraduate student, you get official summer breaks. That's like 3 month long break. You can work full time. You can approach your supervisor to let them hire you as a research assistant. If they're interested, they'll hire you. That's one of the ways you can make money. So there are a lot of things you can do on official summer breaks as well to fund your education. I think this is the end of the funding section. So I'm going to hand it over to Meena to talk about budgeting and financing.
Yeah, thank you, Zane. I've included this link for you. Previously, we'll share the link again. This is a fantastic site that you can use. Even Shai has shared additional links so that you can see the different programs that you can apply for. As you start narrowing down, you can actually then specify, so not only the degrees that are offered, but also you'll be able to calculate what budget you need. Shana, next slide, please. So here's an example. I decided to look at Bachelor's of Computer Science. We have many students that come to the University of Waterloo. I wanted to just give you some numbers. And you can see the same thing for any of the programs that you're thinking about in the previous, I've shared that link with you. Just look in the chat. Here you see that you need tuition. Program fees are about $60,000, including compulsory fees, books, and supplies. Then you have the cost of living and shelter. This is probably based on shared accommodation. It is very expensive in terms of housing. Think about groceries. The cost of groceries, as we know, around the world has become very expensive. Other miscellaneous things. You do want to have money to enjoy your experience. There's also, and taking care of yourself. Transportation, that may or may not actually be included in tuition, and there are discounts for public transportation. So you can see the total. If you add both the education costs and the living costs, are about $73,000, and that's just for computer science. It can get much more expensive depending on the program that you are thinking about pursuing. Next slide, please, Shana. This is what I want you to think about. In the budget calculator, the Excel spreadsheet that I've given you, think about it term to term. As chair last year, it was very difficult. We had a number of emergencies. It took us a very long time, weeks, months, to be able to find the money, the gap money, whatever the student had and was missing. That's just why I want you as a family, please sit with your parents, and parents also sit and have an honest conversation with your children. Think about the tuition that you're spending, the living expenses term by term. Zane was talking about co-op. Look at, depending on your program, if you're planning to do co-op and work with an employer to fund your education, in which term will you have that co-op accessible to you? It may not be term 2, it may be term 3. It could be midway through year 2. It could actually be year 3. This means that you need to have the tuition money and living expenses. You need to have this clarified and have this accessible to you. Most students are just coming with 1 year's worth of funding, and then it is a terrible scramble to figure out how they can meet those gaps. Remember also with co-op, you may need to travel somewhere else for the co-op. It's not necessary that you will get the co-op near the university where you're where you're studying. You may need to travel to a co-op that could be in a completely different city. You will have to think about housing as well. These are other costs that you should put in your co-op terms. Next slide, Shana. So how could you do this? This is how we have created the budget so that you tally at the top all of your expenses, your tuition, living expenses, and then we sincerely ask you to have an honest conversation as a family. Where is the source of funding in term 1, term 2, moving in across all of the terms? The better clarity you have, the less stress you will feel. So for example, if your tuition is 60,000 per year or 30,000 per term, how will you complete that payment? Some students have taken it to the day before having to give tuition to find this money. You need to be proactive. You will look at your family savings, your own, if you're doing part-time work, look for bursaries and scholarships. Please be proactive about this. We will give you all of the resources, but you need to search. We have spent hours telling students, please search for the funding on the university sites. It's there. But if you want the funding, then you need to apply several months in advance. It's not something we can do. The credit line that Zane spoke about at TD was something that we found under emergency situations but then the students scrambled to find a Canadian cosigner. If you have Canadians, family members here, have this discussion. Are they willing to co-sign on that credit line? And I think this student got about $20,000, but then it's just $20,000 per year. Here you can see if you might get a bursary of $3,000, scholarship of $3,000, credit line maybe up to $20,000, and co-op. Remember with co-op, everything that you earn is not going to be accessible to you for tuition. It's not all going to go to tuition living expenses. You need to pay your expenses during co-op terms, your living expenses, your grocery expenses. You may have had to travel, so you will be paying a different housing fee. Think about what you're going to save from your co-op, and also be aware it's not necessary that you could actually be placed in a co-op. One student didn't get co-op, had to actually work on campus. How will you fill those gaps knowing that the Aga Khan Education Board in Canada doesn't have funding available for international students at the undergraduate level? Chanel, next slide, please. Okay, so the next few slides are essentially giving you access to the calculators. Next slide, please. The calculators are worth it. Open it up even now and do this with your parents. And something I wanted to mention for parents, we're willing to do anything and everything for our children so that they can be educated. I've had families say that we're willing to sell our properties. You don't need to do this. Don't think about short term versus long term. There are opportunities at the master's and graduate level. You don't want to think 4 terms and change your long-term financial security when you can easily come as a graduate student. Don't put this type of pressure on yourselves, and be honest as a family what is good, what is healthy for both your parents and for you as students. Next slide, Shania. So these are just links for you to be able to access budget calculators. You can open up the link that I've shared to see at the University of Waterloo. They'll actually walk you through each of the programs, specific programs, and what you'll need for tuition, what you will need for living expenses. Next slide, Shania. Here is one at another university, Wilfrid Laurier. You can look, absolutely, we'll definitely share all of these links with you, so don't worry, you won't miss anything. Look on the university website. So this is my last slide. I'll walk you through this. You can find this, go through this in advance, look at the websites, keep digging, and use this template that we've shared with you to take note of your expenses. You will eventually see there's going to be a large gap. Term 2, I might not have enough money for term 2, term 3. Where am I going to get this from? When students approached us last year, this is the process we went through. Zane and I would go through this. It becomes a very stressful situation. We persisted, and this is how we found the credit line with the Canadian cosigner. What we do is we had to ask a student to reduce their course workload without affecting their immigration status, so that this student could actually work more hours. We supported the student by giving resume support, job finding. We started looking for program specific or international student bursary. We did find one, but if you need the money in 30 days, 60 days, that bursary won't be accessible for 4 months, 6 months. It depends on the time, the deadlines. Sometimes there's emergency funding from school, but not necessary. Empower was something we found as well. It's for the last 2 years of your bachelor's or 2 year, professional programs, very high interest rate. You need to apply well in advance. They have a backlog. There are so many students that are applying for this. So you can see that this becomes, we look for what are ways that you can fill that gap. At $73,000, you need to really have that money in place for term 1, term 2, and think how much your co-op and your job will actually provide to you. So that's it as far as my slides are concerned.
All right. So we're going to talk about some of the policies and some of the rules that have changed so far. Now, one of the reasons why we want to talk about this is because the rules in Canada and the policies in Canada change quite a lot of times. So even if you are here, you have started your studies, it's always a good habit, I would say, to keep an eye on what the Canadian government is saying as regards to your study permit or as regards to your options after you finish your studies. The recent policy change that we have observed, and this actually was announced in December only, so a few weeks ago, if I'm not wrong, is that they have increased the cost of living requirement. Now, what does this mean? You may have heard about the block account or the GIC account. Initially, I think for about past 10 years, it was around $10,000 that you had to block in a GIC Canadian account before you come to Canada or before or while you are applying for your study permit or your study visa. Starting from January 2024, the requirement has increased to 20,635 Canadian dollars, which means while you are applying for your study permit, you have to block 20,635 Canadian dollars in that account, in that GIC account. And once you have, hopefully, let's say you get the visa and you come to Canada, you will not have access to the entirety of 20,635 Canadian dollars as soon as you come to Canada. What happens is that they divide it into 12 months installments. So you will receive some amount of your block account money every month. And by the end of usually 12 months, you will have the entire 20,000 money. So you will get that money back, but in pieces, in installments, and you will have to block it at least for more than a year in a Canadian GIC account. So again, what Dr. Meena just said, that you have to keep in mind that there is around $73,000 of money that you should have in order to pursue a bachelor's of, let's say, computer science in University of Waterloo. Also keep in mind that before even applying or before even coming, you would be requiring to have this much to 20,000 more. So it's gonna total up, I would say, around 80 to 90,000 Canadian dollars now. Now, one more thing I want to add here is that there's a possibility that every year this amount may increase as well, because every year the Statistics Canada or the Government of Canada will run a survey or some kind of do an analysis on the cost of living. And based on the cost of living, they will determine whether or not the amount that you see here on your screen should remain intact or should be increased. So this is just one thing that you should keep in mind, that again, the policies do change, and this is a very recent one. So even if you hear someone that 10,000 is the requirement, please let them know, or anyone you know, that the requirement has changed now. The next policy that they have changed is working while on a study permit. So we talked about that you can work on campus, you can work off campus, you can work during your scheduled breaks, which means winter and summer breaks, and you can have co-op. We have talked about these four categories. A policy change in there is that you can work full time on campus, which means in the university, but there are specific eligibility criteria that you must fulfill, which means you have to be enrolled full time in the university. Your university also determines how many hours you can work on campus. So a lot of times universities may say that you cannot work more than 20 hours or 10 hours. So it's the university's decisions as well, a lot of times, to determine how many hours you can work. But officially, as per IRCC, they do not limit you to work, only 20 or 30 hours on campus. You can work full time. Another requirement is that um, the requirement that you can work full time on campus should be written in your study permit as well. So when you receive the study permit, hopefully just make sure you read it thoroughly. Now I'll talk about the off campus one because it's a bit trickier now. So they recently ran a pilot of a policy or a program, you could say, where students, international students, were allowed to work full time off campus, which means outside the university. But, and you would see this here as well, a lot of places, or you would see a lot of people saying this as well. Now, the students who are coming to Canada, let's say in December or from January onwards, you can only work 20 hours off campus, no more than 20 hours. You may see that somewhere it would say that you can work full time, but that policy is only for those who were in Canada before October 2022. I'll repeat this. Students who came to Canada before October 2022, only they can work full time up until April 2024. Those who are applying for studies in Canada now or will be coming to Canada in January 2024, they cannot work full-time off campus. They will have to work only 20 hours off campus. They will have 20 hours to work off campus. If you are found that you have worked more hours than you are allowed to, then they can immediately cancel your study permit and will deport you back to Pakistan. So it's a very specific, very strict requirement. So make sure that you fulfill this requirement and you really follow the policies as well. One of the last policies that I just want to talk to you about is the study conditions on students. Now, initially, students were allowed to study online from Pakistan as well. Students were allowed to study online from Canada as well. So, for instance, one of your universities may be in a different province and you will be studying in the same province, but in a completely different city remotely or virtually. So it was fine before December 2023. The policy has changed. Now, at least 50% of your program should be in person, should be in class. If you are found that you're at the end of the degree, that you have not fulfilled this criteria, that you have not fulfilled 50%, you have not attended 50% of your classes in person in Canada in your university, then this may actually reject you for your postgraduate work permit, or you cannot apply for work permit even after you have graduated from your studies. What is work permit? It just allows you to stay in Canada and work after you have studied. If during the study, and this is one of the last point of this policy, if during the study you move out of Canada and you, let's say, go back to Pakistan and you are studying from Pakistan for a few months, remember that when you apply for your work permit, some of the months that you have traveled outside of Canada, those will be deducted from your work permit that you will receive. It doesn't mean that you cannot go out of Canada once you have come to Canada and have started studying. You can, but you have to make sure that it is not um, during your study time period or during your terms or semesters. Scheduled breaks are the perfect time to travel around. During the terms, if you do and you study online from somewhere else, it will actually deduct some of the months from your work permit. Now, how to look for an eligible university. Not all universities in Canada are allowed to accommodate international students. which means the first step that you should be having or you should do is to go to this website that I have here on the screen. Make sure, first of all, you'll have to highlight what province you want to go into. Then see whether or not your university that you want to apply is in this list. It's called Designated Learning Institute or DLI list. If it is in there, then it means you can apply to that university and the university can accommodate an international student. That's the first step. Second step is, I know that a lot of students who would come here to study would also want to stay here, which means the only one of the options for staying here after study is to apply for a work permit, also called postgraduate work permit. Not all universities, I would reiterate this because I've seen a lot of cases of students coming here to Canada and then feeling stuck. Not all universities give you postgraduate work permit after you have studied. It depends, and you have to look into this list only. The list says which university will give you or will make you eligible for a postgraduate work permit after you have studied. Make sure you see whether it says yes or no. If it says no, then keep in mind that you will not get work permit after your study. If it says yes, then after you have studied, you will apply for your work permit and then you get work permit based on the number of years you have studied, you get work permit accordingly. So you can get work permit from 8 months to 3 years. But that's a different conversation. I just wanted to say, because I know a lot of you want to stay in Canada also. So just make sure that you look into this website. I don't want you to come to Canada thinking that you will stay, and then you have selected a university that doesn't give you work permit and then just struggling with yourself to shift the universities. It costs a lot when you shift your university after you have come to Canada. I have seen those cases as well. So just bear in mind that these are few policy things that you must follow. Now, how to choose, I'll just quickly give you an overview of this, and you can do your research, and we can talk about this later as well if you would want. It depends where you want to study, what province. So Alberta, British Columbia, Ontario. Ontario, of course, has a lot of good universities as well. But we have talked about how costly it can be in Ontario as well as in Vancouver or in British Columbia as well. So you can also look at other provinces too while you are studying. Size of the institution, how elite I would say, or how prestigious this institution is. Is it, I would just name a few. Is it University of Ottawa? Is it University of Toronto? Is it University of Calgary or Alberta? University of Ottawa. So these are some big universities that I'm calling, and I have of course missed out on others as well. The McGill University. There are many. It depends what kind of university you are going to. What is the quality of university as well? A lot of times there are small universities and they're amazing in quality. They give you the same quality of education that University of Toronto would be giving you as well. So you can look into those as well, because the funding there is also, the tuition fees in those universities are also quite less as well. So you can look in those universities too. But again, remember the DLI list. Quality of program, how important your program, your study, your degree is in that university. For medical, I would say McGill University is a really good university. For development sector, or if you want to study something related to humanities, sciences, and everything, there are again multiple universities for that. Queen's University is a good one. The one I'm studying in, Lakehead University, is a really good one for social justice and for STEM education, bachelor's in STEM education particularly. U of T, of course, is a really good university for public health, for public policy as well. So again, do your research on what kind of program you want to study and what kind of university it is. Determine your cost of tuition, your cost of living as well. It varies as per provinces. Cost of living in Ontario and BC, British Columbia, is way more than in Alberta. Keep that in mind as well. Length of the program, how long it is. If you're doing a master's, is it 2 years? Is it 1 year? Is it 1.5 years? Depends. It also will actually have an impact on your work permit as well after you graduate. Again, be proactive when you are looking for funding for your scholarship. Start way in advance, plan way in advance. Resources, multiple resources, ample amount of resources is available in the university. Make sure you connect with your university. Make sure you explore all resources available in the university, first of all. I would really say try to opt for a university which is closer to your Smiley community. It really gets difficult as an international student to come to a new country. and to not know anyone, or to not have a community as well to even interact with. So try your best to be close to Jamaat Khana, to be close to Ismaili community, so that you can at least, the very least, I would say, talk to new people, talk to people from our community only as well, so that there is some network as well that you can build. And with network, you will get a lot of other opportunities as well. So yes, this is a general overview, a run through of what to keep in mind while you are applying, while you have received your work permit, or sorry, study permit, and while you are in Canada as well. So it covers almost everything. I'm gonna pass it over to Shai now, for this in the next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on mute. Thanks so much, Chanel. So I'm going to try to wrap up quickly here because I know that there are still questions, and we've been trying to answer your questions in the chat as we've been presenting. So what I can say is I know that this information can be incredibly overwhelming. There's a lot of information to consider around where you want to go within Canada, what program you want to study, what institution you want to go to, and then overlaying that with all of the funding components and budgeting components that we just talked about, as well as understanding what some of the policies are from a government perspective around studying in Canada. And so I understand that that can be overwhelming. What we can tell you that's incredibly important is start early. Start your planning early and do your research. There are 10 different provinces in Canada, all of which have excellent universities and other post-secondary institutions. And it's really important that you take the time to look at where you want to go, what you want to study, and how you're going to fund it. So, making sure that you are looking at the university that you want to go to, keeping track of application deadlines and the documents that you need in order to get into that university is really important. And staying on top of the correspondence with that university is also vital. Making sure that you are thinking about the things that we just talked about in terms of expenses and budgets, and thinking about how you're going to plan what you need based on based on the budget that you've created around what that cost of living in Canada as well as studying in Canada is going to be for you, and what your sources of income are going to be. And then finally, making sure that you have the appropriate permits or visa or status within Canada, and getting information from your nearest Canadian embassy, as well as the individual university's international student advisor, is really important. Next slide. Throughout the presentation, we've been putting a bunch of resources into the chat box, a bunch of links around what you need in order to, lots of links around what you need from a funding perspective, links to scholarships, links to the Aga Khan Education Board for Canada's post-secondary webpage. And I do just want to say that some of those broad links are on this page, especially around Aga Khan Education Board for Canada. Lots of resources on our webpage for people who are interested in studying in Canada. We've got a lot of asynchronous resources on the page, lots more webinars like this one that have been done in the past for this Aga Khan Education Board in Pakistan, as well as ones that we've done for India and others, are on these web pages. There are webinars on life after high school and thinking about how you go about choosing a program of study. We've also got a grad student resource mobilization program, which helps make connections for people who are doing their research masters or their PhDs. And then we've got a lot of webinars on career exploration and guidance, everything from applying to med school, law school, journalism, and even fashion. So those are, there's some links on this webpage, on this slide, and then there are lots of links within the chat box as well. So please do make sure to check those out. I do want to just say, take this opportunity to say thank you so much to Shanil, Zain, and Mina for sharing your incredible expertise throughout the presentation. And I do also want to thank, again, Aga Khan Education Board for Pakistan for this opportunity to share information with you today. So thank you so much. And we'll hand it back over to Quorum to moderate the last few minutes of the session.
Thank you, everyone. Really great to have all your presentations. We've got a packed house, almost around 100 participants, and we've got people listening to our YouTube page as well. I think before I start moderating questions, I think just something that I have it from a lot of students. Is there a concept called fully funded undergraduate study? Is there a thing called fully funded? Is there a process whereby you don't really have to pay anything, or is this, just the concept of this is not right? So, I mean, we start off with this, and perhaps, take other questions as we move forward.
Maybe I can start, and then Zain, Meena, Shai, feel free to chime in.
Sure.
A really interesting question, I would say. If you talk about, especially in terms of Canada, yes, I would say, right, there is a concept of fully funded undergraduate studies. And by fully funded, I'll just reiterate, it simply means it covers your cost of living, it covers your airfare, it covers your even tuition fees as well. So it covers almost everything. So the concept is there. In terms of implementation, in terms of availability and accessibility, it's highly rare. I'll be really honest with you. It's rare to get fully funded scholarship in both graduate and undergraduate in Canada. It's rare. We shared a few names of the scholarships on one of our slides. Those are the ones that we could find. There are a few more, but again, you can find some of these from the university website only. So you can have it from the York University. There's one in U of T as well. The McCall-McBain is a really good one that have recently opened in past 1 or 2 years only for masters. So yes, very specific criteria, highly competitive because they only get 1 or 2 or 3 students internationally, no more than that. And they have a very strict criteria as well. Again, I would say that it's always good to, just read thoroughly what the eligibility criteria is. So it's always good to aim for these fully funded scholarships, but also to know that, and I'm not here to disappoint, I'm actually going to encourage everyone to even apply to these universities, because most of us who are here actually applied as well to these scholarships. But I'm just going to give you a real scenario where it's it's for everyone, international, not just Pakistan, for everyone. There are specific scholarships for Indians, for Chinese, maybe for Mexicans as well, if I'm not wrong, for Ukrainians too, but not for Pakistanis. So just keep that in mind, I would say, to everyone, whoever is applying for or looking or searching for these scholarships.
Great. Thank you, Sunil. We're going to try and take as many questions as we can. Sadakat, I'm going to unmute you, and maybe you can ask your question. Let me just... I believe you can ask your question. Unmute and ask your question, Sadakat. Can you do that? Okay, by the time that I'll figure this out, I think one other thing, maybe any one of you can answer this. In terms of the admission process, in terms of the preparation required to apply for a university, and we are talking about undergraduate studies at this point, what do you see is the starting point? When should a student ideally start prepping up for the university? And how long should they really devote to this entire process? Because this is not something which will happen overnight. You'd have to invest your time and resources. So if you can just take us through the process of really applying to a good quality university, and how much effort should it ideally require for any student of thinking from starting to thinking to eventually apply.
Sanil, maybe I can start. Okay, I'm actually going to share my experience. I studied in Pakistan. I am from Pakistan, Karachi. I applied for undergraduate level in Canada. Never made it to Canada during undergrad level because it was too expensive, wasn't able to get the scholarship and what have you. So anyway, I studied A levels, so we do 13 years of education. I started researching universities when I was in grade 11. That's when I started looking at universities. I started to figure out this is what I want to do, maybe economics, maybe math, something like that. And it was as broad as a Google search. And this is probably going to answer a lot of questions I see in the chat. How do you figure out what universities are available or for which program? Just Google it. Google is your best friend. Okay. I want to study economics, best universities for economics in Canada. You'll probably get a big list. Okay. Validate some of those universities, go to their websites and see if they're actually existing, how long they have been in existence. This is the due diligence that I would say you need to do as well, because there are a lot of scammers going around. Anyway, once you figure out this is the list of universities, then it depends on what your requirement is. My first requirement was I needed the scholarship. That was my basic requirement. If I didn't get the scholarship, or if that university was not affordable for me, there is no way I could go. So I then had to shortlist that university based on does this university offer any international scholarship? So there was something in Waterloo, there was one thing in University of British Columbia, and something in McGill. I applied to these universities along with my applications for those particular scholarships. Now, I say this very lightly, but remember, I started researching about universities 3 years before I applied. Okay. By the time it was time to apply, I had all the documents, all the letters of recommendation, all my essays and personal statements, and my financial documents ready to send out to meet the application deadline and the scholarship application deadline. There is almost no way you can do this within a year. I'm sorry to say this, there's no way you can do this within a year. It's a 3-year process, let's be honest. If you really want to, if you're really passionate, start 3 years early. You apply, you usually get admission decision first. They say you have to wait on the scholarship decision because that's still in process. You wait for it. If you get it, you apply for the visa. Sometimes it's too late to apply for the visa by the time that they give you the scholarship decision. I'll say that too. That happened to me as well. So what you can then do is maybe request the university to keep your scholarship and defer your admission to another semester or the next year. That's an option that's possible. Again, that's not an ideal case scenario, but sometimes that's just how things work. Things process very late and you have to defer it because visa itself takes 3 months, I'm pretty sure, right? Shanil, could you please help me if I have missed out on anything?
Then,
yes, go ahead.
I think spot on. I think something that we wanted to hear also, 3-year, roughly the year it takes to really think through the process and then apply and get an admission and get going. It is not something that's going to happen overnight. I think moving on to the funding part, because funding is essentially most of the concern. And I think you guys have shown us what kind of options available generally, but is there a practical strategy? I mean, is there a strategy in place where parents and students can come together and think that, okay, we've got money for 1 year, our kid is going to go, we're going to have him covered for a year or so, and then he can work and save up the money and complete his or her education. And then I think there are templates also where this formula has worked and people have gone on to do, settled well. Do you think there is a practical funding strategy in place, something of a template, something of a formula that students here can think through and have it at the back of their minds that this is something that we're going to do as a very practical sort of funding strategy?
I'm pretty sure everyone has their own strategy. My strategy was I'm not going to come to Canada unless I know that all 2 years of my master's, or maybe 3, 4 years from my bachelor's, were figured out in advance. I'm not a risk taker. So unless I was to get a scholarship, I wouldn't come. But as you said, there are sometimes families who cannot afford. And I would say for those families, try to target master's or graduate studies, not undergraduate studies, because that way your child is only going to study for 2 years. And if you have 1 year covered, it's much easier for your child to cover or earn money through co-op and other things for the next year. I have seen live cases of people who have done that. But remember, if you are going to do that, you need to be extremely, extremely on point. You cannot slack off. You cannot waste time watching Netflix at home. You cannot waste time with your friends. You have to be working 5 to 6 hours a day during your scheduled breaks when you can work more than 20 hours. And if you can't work 20 hours, if you can't work for more than 20 hours during school time, then you please reach the maximum 20 hours that is allowed. Do not slack off. Do not expect something will come up. And I'll just say this once again, do not be in the assumption that AKEB Canada can provide you with funding, because that's just not available to you. Okay? We can help you find things, support you in other ways, but we do not provide money.
Great, thank you, Zach. On this related point, once you complete, and I think I see a question from Faraz Charania. So if anyone pursues his bachelor's or master's, what are the chances of getting a good job in Canada? Because I think the job market is really, a tough nut to crack these days. And if you guys could shed light on, I know this is going to be beyond the scope of this webinar, but any background around the job market, and what are the chances of getting a good job after you graduate?
Right. I think it's a very tricky question as well, I would say, because the experiences has evolved, experiences change as well as per individuals too. And it depends which province you are in as well. It depends which university you have gotten your bachelor's and master's from as well, and what field of study you have pursued as well. So there are multiple factors that vary. Currently, I would say one of the biggest factor that is impacting the job market is the job market itself, that it's literally really difficult to get jobs in Canada because of its economy. However, I would suggest that, and I'm not going to go in that detail, but the policy for one of the streams has recently been imposed, which actually focuses on certain categories to which the Canadian government is focusing on. So there is a health-related category, there is an agriculture-related category, there's a category on pilots as well, there's a category on trades or skills as well. So those are the reason I mentioned those categories is because those are the ones that are somewhat, more in demand in Canada. Of course, IT is also something that is demand, but I have also seen many Canadian as well as international students in Canada who could not land an IT job as well, because that's how tough the job market has become. So again, if you assume that you will get a job directly after your master's, your bachelor's, please do not assume that. It may take, and I'm going to be very straightforward with you, it may take 3 to 6 months after you have studied, after you have finished your study, to get a job on average. Some people could get it earlier, could get it on right after you graduate. A lot of people, one of the person I know hasn't gotten a job. It's been 9 or more months. So it really depends. But I do want you to consider that the job market in Canada has become very difficult to penetrate in the past few months, especially.
Chanel, can I add to that as well?
Oh, please.
If, for example, you are able to figure out your budget, co-op is a fantastic strategy to build your network. So look for the schools that offer co-op. And I would advise the same thing to a Canadian student is look for schools. You can do this through student reviews. Students that say that career services is extremely strong. There are many universities that don't even help Canadian students land jobs. Look through various reviews. If you see students are saying that the career services is great, then you know that this is a school that will support you. Co-op is definitely, or internships are definitely ways for you to build your networks. A lot of finding the jobs is not through job boards, is actually through your connections and the networks you make. Thank you, Shana.
All right, guys. I think we've got a lot of questions coming in, so I'll do a rapid fire here. We're going to ask questions, but let's try and be as brief as we can. Madhya is asking if she's targeting a smaller university in Toronto, such as Seneca, does that limit her chances to get a student visa?
Actually just responded to Madiha. I can just read that
Okay.
response. I'm going to say I don't believe so, Madiha. However, your intention will be very obvious to the visa officer. If they feel that you're not intending to really study honestly, they may reject your visa. So what I'm trying to say is prove to the visa officer through your application. And remember, Canadian study visa is not an interview-based visa process. They don't see you in person. All they have are the documents. Correct me if I'm wrong. At my time, it was no interview. So if there's no interview, all they see are the documents you share with them. If they see your high school transcripts that you have straight A's or your personal statement is very strong, they will believe the fact that you genuinely want to up yourself in a developed country and do well in your education. Then they're more likely to accept your visa application, even if it's for a college like Seneca College or Humber College. So it's not about college or university. It's about your intention and how well you can convey that intention and your honesty to the visa officer.
Great.
If I can,
guys,
sorry.
anything that how important do you think are the extracurricular that we need to show on our resume? Does it really matter? Does it really come down to a level where extracurricular gains enough importance for a university admission?
I can take that one as well. And also just to add in the previous question as well, just really quickly. So Seneca College is mainly known for diplomas, for postgraduate diplomas or certificates. And I'll be really honest with you, and it's really unfortunate as well, and going to be really straightforward too. If you apply for a diploma from Pakistan, it's the chances of getting a study permit is very low. And I'm again going to be very honest with you. I have no idea why, because the chances of getting a study permit on diploma from India is extremely high. But from Pakistan, it's extremely low. So if you're applying for a postgraduate work permit, if you're applying for a diploma, it does reduces your chances. There isn't a research or a policy, but we have seen in past that it reduces your chances of getting a study permit. But we have seen students as well getting a study permit for diplomas as well in Canada. So just keep that in mind when you're applying to, let's say, Seneca or to Humber College. Extracurriculars, yes, it matters. While you're applying to your university, it matters because you have to show whether or not you are really committed to your study, to the degree that you're pursuing. It also matters when you're applying for an entrance scholarship or merit-based scholarship, because they would look at your extracurriculars, and based on what you have mentioned there, extracurriculars, they will provide you some entrance scholarship as well. And so it is purely based on your interest that you show, on the extracurriculars that you show in your application, especially the entrance scholarship. If you're going for a research assistantship or a graduate assistantship, before even you are applying to your master's or to your bachelor's degree, in that case, your research and your proposal matters the most. So those are just few things that you must keep in mind while you're applying for a degree and for scholarships.
And extracurriculars is not just sports, please. It's voluntary experience.
Yep.
If you are in Scouts, if you are in Rovers in Pakistan, all of that counts. Aga Khan Development Network is a big, well-known agency, or Aga Khan Foundation. If you volunteer somewhere, Aga Khan University Hospital, please put that down on your resume. Okay?
Guys, you guys have mentioned, and I think Sunil touched upon the quality of universities. And beyond the quality of universities, I think there are parameters that we evaluate which universities should a person go to. We've got a module on this at AKEB Pakistan. We talk about university selection. But in terms of, and in Pakistan, generally, we have got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 universities. And is there a similar sort of a cadre when you think of Canadian universities? Are there tier 1 universities that you should apply to? And then there are, tier 2 and tier 3 universities that you could apply to, but, knowing that maybe even if you do get in, there won't be much prospects of it going forward. So just want you guys to touch upon the quality of universities and what should be the broader framework, when thinking about applying to universities.
Right. Maybe I can start, and then Meena, Shai, Zain, please feel free to chime in. I think Meena can also talk in length about this because she teaches at the University of Waterloo. So yes, in terms of tiers, I would say, again, as far as I know, there aren't specific tiers of universities, but there are some well-known universities that everyone should apply, and everyone do apply. So on the top of my head, again, I can think of University of Toronto, University of Ottawa, of University of Waterloo, McMaster University, McGill, Queen's University. We talked about Wilfrid Laurier University as well. These are some, of course, and I've, of course, not mentioned all the names, but these are some major universities that everyone should apply to. Then, of course, there are some other.
I've also shared a link there, Chanel, just to add that. If your university is listed on that provincial government's website, like the Government of Ontario's website, it's definitely legit. You can guarantee that because the government is endorsing that university. So I've just sent a link for Ontario. You can find a link for Quebec. You can find a link for British Columbia. A lot of those links, but public universities. That's one way to figure out if the university is good quality.
Right. Thank you for that. And I've also shared the DLI link as well in one of the in the chat as well. So the DLI list where it shows that whether or not you're eligible to apply to the university and whether or not you'll get the work permit. One more thing about the quality of education in universities. Again, as I said, there are a few small universities as well, like not as big as University of Toronto or not as old as University of Toronto, but they are really good universities as well in terms of programs, in terms of the quality of education, and in terms of the amount of attention you get from your professors as well, and the amount of resources you get from the university too. University of Toronto is really big. And so a lot of times what I've heard is that it's really difficult for professors to focus on students and students to get enough amount of attention from professors and to get all kinds of resources too. But you get a really good network from that university. On the contrary, universities like, as I said, Lakehead University, it's growing university, but it's an amazing university, especially for STEM, for bachelors. And if you want to really, build a good network with professor, so it's a good university. And also if you want to get good resources as well, then it's a good university. So it really matters what you want to do, what you want to pursue, what kind of degree you want to pursue, and where you want to pursue as well. Some of these major universities are in, I would say, major cities as well. So you have to consider as well whether or not you will be able to afford the cost of living in living those cities. University of Toronto is in the GTA area, or sometimes you could say downtown too as well. So it's really expensive there. It's expensive living there too. So while I would say considering the quality of university, also consider whether or not you will be able to afford living there and the tuition fees as well of that university.
Great, thank you, Shahid. Last two questions, and let's try and be quick around this. Any final advice to students from you guys? There's any final piece of thought process that you want them to carry forward with? What would that be?
I think all of us will say the same thing. Be proactive. Prepare well in advance. That's our best advice that we can give you. 3 years, it's not a joke. 3 years is a good time frame. Start planning 3 years in advance. Okay, that's my advice anyway.
Awesome. Last question. Any advice for parents listening to us?
I can add to that is I know we are willing to do as parents. I have a child as well going to university, doing anything and everything to educate our children. Be very careful about what you can handle financially. As we said, the funding is limited. Go in with eyes open. Don't sacrifice your long term for an undergraduate program when your child can do master's and PhD, and there's a better process for immigration as a master's and PhD. Don't sell your assets and land yourself in bankruptcy. It really isn't worth it for undergraduate studies at all. You're not sacrificing your child's education if you stay local. There are so many opportunities as a master's, a PhD, not only in Canada, but in the United States as well. World will open up as a graduate student.
That is such a great piece of advice, Dr. Meena, and really, I think I can, resonate with the Pakistani community also. In Pakistan, we've got excellent schools, at least at the undergraduate level, and this is what we keep telling them all the time. There's, top tier universities in Pakistan. You have excellent chances once you graduate, and you can always think about graduate studies abroad. Any final words from you guys before we sign off?
I think we have covered almost a lot. We have spoken a lot, I would say, taken a lot of your time as well. But I would actually just would like to thank you, Kuram, um, for arranging this and for everyone as well, to be really honest, to joining this the webinar. And I know there will be questions. There will always be questions. It's a very tedious process. Sometimes it feels discouraging as well to apply to this process, but it's worth it as well. But also have to be really mindful of all the realities as well that we have talked about. We're always there to support you. We're always here to guide everyone. I'll just reiterate what Zen said. We cannot help you financially, of course, Alkhan Education Canada. But we're always here to help build network, to look for resources, to help you even budget as well if you want, help you with your studies too in terms of reducing the course load or anything. So we are here to support you throughout the process, but you have to do your research. You have to be really proactive as well. Besides that, again, thank you so much for accommodating us, for listening to us. I know it's a lot, but again, thank you.
No, thank you guys. Thank you everyone. Thank you, Shanil, Zan, Shay, Dr. Meena. Really appreciate everyone taking time out and doing this for us. On behalf of Afghan Education Board Pakistan, I once again would like to thank everyone who's joined today. Our speakers are all the listeners. And we've got this live also at YouTube. Normally, I think we're going to have a lot of questions after this webinar. So we're going to be bouncing off a lot of those questions to you guys as well. And hopefully we'll take the conversation forward and keep collaborating. Thank you so much, everyone. Yalimdad.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll send the slides very soon, the recording, the slides, the links. So don't worry, over the next couple of days. Let us know if you have any other questions. I'm still here.
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Ali Muhammad speaking, the one who said I got
Hi.
admission in.
Did you connect with Karam?
Yeah, he asked me for my number, but I don't know if he got it.
Okay, I'll give you my email address here. If you want to ask questions for all of you, you can just send me an email here. Okay? And I'll see if I can connect you by email.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem. Any other questions? I know most of our speakers are gone. But if you have any questions, I can stay for a couple minutes. Okay, if not, you can contact me by email and I can connect you with the rest of the speakers if you like. يلا مدد.